Well, Halifax Town suffered their first league defeat in 5 games as they lost 1-0 to Yeovil at the weekend. And joining us now to discuss everything to do with the Shaman, it's the Halifax Courier's Tom Scargill. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
No problem.
So, a bit of a come down, wasn't it, after the recent kind of upturn in form, and a bit of a missed opportunity, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's kind of brought them back to earth with a bump, really. They've got some really good momentum going into the game, climbing up the table, playoffs kind of getting into view, and then I suppose you'd say it's typical Halifax Town. They'd kind of tripped themselves up in what looked on paper one of the easier games of recent weeks. Yeovil looked limited, really. They're in a position where they've just got a new manager. They're trying to kind of build some foundations, and they didn't really offer much of a threat. Their penalty was their only shot on target in the whole game. Halifax weren't brilliant, but for them to come away with a defeat was very unjust. And really, they only had themselves to blame because they did create some decent chances, but the finishing just wasn't up to scratch.
No, exactly. And when it comes down to a penalty to settle, it is a bit frustration. You mentioned that they didn't quite get to those performance levels of the last few weeks. Any particular reason you can put it down to, do you think?
I think probably Yeovil deserve a bit of credit. They did defend very well. They put the bodies on the line. But for whatever reason, Halifax just didn't play with the same tempo, the same energy, the same purpose when they had the ball. Maybe if they took the lead in the first kind of 20 minutes or so, Rob Parker had a couple of good chances. If one of those goes in, then it's probably a completely different complexion on the match. But I suppose it's kind of part and parcel of football. It's kind of what Gareth Southgate was saying about England when they drew with USA. They're not going to play to the absolute maximum every game. You're going to get peaks and troughs, and this was definitely a trough, I would say, for Halifax.
Yeah. How much of a concern is the goal scoring then? Because, I mean, that clash at the weekend, it was between two of the bottom 3 lowest scorers in the division, and you mentioned that it did show up. That's got to be really concerning for Millington, doesn't it?
It is the main issue at the moment. Defensively, they've tightened up. It seems like a fairly long time ago that they were conceding 3s and 4 and 5s in games. So the lack of goals has to be addressed. A lot of the fans are crying out for new signings, but I think what Millington is saying is they're not that easy to find, especially kind of going midway through a season. Which club is going to want to let a striker who's capable of scoring a lot of goals go, and is not going to bring anyone in for the sake of it. The only kind of way I think they're going to bring anyone in is someone who would kind of instantly get in the first team. So the chances of signing someone like that are fairly slim, I would suggest, even though the fans might be like, well, someone might be better than no one, would probably be the fans' view, whereas Millington is kind of the opposite of that. And I think Millington still believes that there are enough goals in the squad, and maybe there are other things that can be done in terms of creating more chances, creating better chances, rather than just looking at, is it poor finishing? Are there actually other ways to look at it? But whatever spin you put on it, they have to start scoring more goals because they can't be relying on keeping clean sheets to get wins. They've only scored 2 goals in 4 games this season in the league, which just isn't enough if they're going to be pushing towards the playoff places. They have to have more firepower.
Yeah, absolutely. And going ahead next, it's Chesterfield up next, which is on paper not going to be an easy game. Chesterfield sat in 3rd on 4 league games on the trot there. But is this not the type of team that Halifax have pulled results out against this season?
Yeah, you could argue that. I spoke to Jack Senior, the captain, standing captain this week, and he talked about, Solihull were up in a similar position to Chesterfield when Halifax played them, and they got a win there. So that shows that they can get results against the more fancied teams. Boreham would as well, you'd argue, fit into that category. But talk about firepower, and Chesterfield have got it in abundance, I would say. Looking at their scorers this season, they've got someone on 7, someone on 6, 5, 4. Just the kind of goals that Halifax just haven't been producing. They've got some really quality players for this level. They're in a very good place at the moment, 1-6 on the bounce. So I think they'll be coming to Halifax really kind of fancying the chances. But it's up to Halifax to prove really that they can compete with a team like Chesterfield. It's kind of interesting to look at. Halifax finished above Chesterfield in the league last season. Chesterfield knocked them out of the playoffs, and they're kind of 15 points above Halifax this season. So Town really haven't been able to keep pace with the likes of Chesterfield. I'm sure they'd argue there's mitigating circumstances for that in terms of budget, upheaval of manager and players leaving. So I think, as I say, it's a chance for the kind of the new look Halifax Town to prove that they might not be up there at the moment in and amongst the pace setters, but a lot of players retain belief that they can be in and around the playoff picture come the end of the season. So this is a chance to prove that they've got what it takes, I suppose.
Yeah. And after that, it's Dorking then on Tuesday in the rearranged match there. How do you see that one going? I mean, Dorking, they're just one place above Halifax in the league there, similar seasons. How do you see that one panning out?
Well, it'd be a bit of a minor miracle if it actually gets played, because that's the fourth day it's had this season. Caused a bit of a tete-a-tete, shall we say, on social media between the clubs, so that adds a bit of spice to the occasion.
I'm dreading the tweet.
Dorking are an interesting team, seem to score a lot, seem to be capable of conceding a lot. I think Millington will know them better than any other team in the league other than Halifax, because it's prepared for them so many times already. So I don't think there'll be any surprises other than the fact that they've maybe added some loan signings fairly recently. I would like to think it's a winnable game on paper for Halifax, especially at home. I'd certainly be more concerned on the face of it about Chesterfield as an opposition, especially with kind of Dorking travelling up on a Tuesday night. But Dorking are unpredictable, and I think it's dangerous to kind of sweep them aside and say that they're a beatable team, because they've had a good season for a team that's just promoted into this league. They've got some very good results, so you can't kind of write them off like that. But if I was a betting man, I would maybe say Chesterfield probably going to win, possibly going to win on Saturday. So Dorking then could be, on paper at least, a kind of a decent chance for Town to get back to winning ways if they do get beaten by Chesterfield.
Yeah. Do you hear any murmurings on the transfer front then? Anything kind of in the pipeline on that front as we head into the Christmas period?
Doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like it's for the lack of trying. I think Millington said that there is budget there, that the chairman will back him if the right player is there. But I think what's maybe influencing it is the fact that they've had this upturn in form for the last few weeks. And I think if they were still in dire straits, then they'd be maybe a bit less picky about who they brought in. But the fact that they've had this upturn in form, there's a real camaraderie and a togetherness that's been shown over the last 2 or 3 months. And I don't think they want to just bring anyone in and risk kind of upsetting that. Also, the fact that they're getting players back from injury, they could have 3 more available on Saturday. So it's perhaps not as desperate as it was when Dearsarovwe was suspended and what have you. So it doesn't sound like there's anything imminent. Maybe when it gets to January, it might be, 1 or 2 might head out of the club, and then that might free up a bit more in the budget to bring 1 or 2 in. We'll see. But in the meantime, I think it's a good chance for the likes of Harker and Dearsarovwe to prove that they can get the goals. Dearsarovwe has certainly shown that he can. He went on a good run of form of late. Harker missed some chances against Yeovil, but has shown he can finish. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're 2 bad options. And it'd be interesting to see over the next 2 or 3 weeks if they can kind of plug the gap and start to find the scoring boots, which would maybe make an addition kind of not as urgent.
Fantastic stuff. Tom, thank you very much for joining us always, and we'll speak to you again shortly.
No worries. Cheers.